Hi Atharva, how are you?
All good. I guess pretty excited. There are certain principles when it comes to designing ecosystems.
These days in the industry, more people only know about UX as making screens. That's the least of our problems when we are, working on a
We
project.
used to detect your lost earbuds, and even the tag. They were products which we get from the engineers are sometimes so basic that you're like, ये last moment पे था, it clicked कि hello आना चाहिए, and presentation को कुछ तो 3-4 घंटे ही बचे हैं.
What is your main thing? Is what I'm trying to ask. Hi Atharva, how are you?
All good. I guess pretty excited for this. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So I want to know what was your first reaction when I sort of asked you or approached you about this podcast?
Do I have the amount of experience required to talk for this? But I guess, again, as everyone says, you can't. I don't want to be preachy or anything, but I'll just talk about basically what I do rather than what you can do.
Correct.
Yeah.
That also makes sense. So now, to start the whole thing, if it would be better if you could just sort of introduce yourself to the audience, because I think you would do it better than I would. What you do, what do you do? Let's just go with it.
Hello. My name is Atharva, and I currently work at Samsung, where I work on multi-device experiences. If that's a new term, it basically revolves around how your multiple devices, including your laptops, phones, tablet, all work together, and how you can have a seamless experience between them. It's like an ecosystem, and I try to come up with new use cases every time a new feature is launched or anything from other companies. We try to do something better from that.
Amazing. And you can also mention the internships you did before coming to
Okay.
Samsung.
So before Samsung, I interned at Bosch Home Appliances, and it wasn't a pure industrial design focused work, I would say. Like, I was much of a researcher where I would go and interview people about their daily activities inside kitchens, and then we would come up with something which would suit their needs. And before that, when I was in third year, I interned with Havels, which was my first exposure to an internship, and as well as getting to know about how you interact with senior designers and basically getting mentored. So that was like my first internship.
Yeah. So now, since you mentioned that you have worked on the multiple device system in phones and tablets and all the other portable devices, we had discussed this before, that there is an intersection of hardware and software in the whole thing that you work at. So can you explain a little about that to the audience?
Yes, let's see how I can make it as easy as possible. But we all know that UX is not a very single term. Like, it just doesn't revolve around what you are seeing on the screen, but it also revolves around how you can make experiences beyond the screens. And that's where my job takes me. Like, I have multiple number of devices, and then I have to think about how these devices can complement each other. Like, there are certain principles when it comes to designing ecosystems in these consumer electronic devices. So one thing is that things have to be continuous. Like, when you are using, for example, two devices at the same time, they need to talk to each other. Then second would be, they have to be complementary. A task which you do on one particular device and you end up using the other device, it should complement the previous task. So these two things are really important when it comes to my kind of work. So yeah, I would sum up by saying that I work on making devices talk to each other in a better way.
Okay.
Like, it's not purely like the end result doesn't have to be a screen, but it would be introduction to newer technologies. Like, I might sit with engineers and try to come up with new kind of hardware as well.
Hmm. Amazing. Okay. And you just mentioned that we all know that UX is not only a niche, like it's not only about screens, right? We
Yeah,
go that there are so many places in which UX actually works. And I think we had a discussion on it that how these days in the industry more people only know about UX as making screens or as just making UI elements. And I remember when I told you that how the developers are having a problem in making screens for the designs that we came up with, you're
yeah,
like, that's the least of our problems when we are
yeah,
working on a
yeah,
project. Okay, so the question was basically that right now we talked about how UX is not all about screens, right? And you personally don't work on screens like UI
yeah,
of, like, that's not your main
yeah.
thing.
That's not my main thing.
So what is your main thing is what I'm trying to ask. And how is that different from the UI screens? So right now we discussed how industry is only about, like, UX is only tagged with ki screens hai. You come up with an application design or you
Yeah,
come
yeah.
up with a design for our web portal. Like whenever I tell anyone that I'm doing UX, अच्छा तो तुम इंटरफेस डिज़ाइन करते हो वो करते हो बट व्हेन वी हैड अ डिस्कशन यू टोल्ड मी अ कम्प्लीटली डिफरेंट specter of UX in general.
Yeah, so I would say in my field, firstly, knowing what hardware you are working with is really important because we collaborate a lot with engineers, as I previously mentioned as well. So, whenever there is a new sensor, for example, I think I told you about ultra wide bands like UWB or NFC or Bluetooth. These are different communication mediums, right? So we should know as designers what are their capabilities and what kind of communication can be made possible. So I don't know, like we have used Apple's tap to share contacts and everything, right? So the output of that animation is a very later thing, but like what can you do with those bands? Like you can use UWB to contact devices each other and then communicate something. So that is the core crux of what we think on. Like you have two hardwares and what are the capabilities of the hardware and then think scenarios around them.
Okay.
So I recently, like, I don't know, I was just getting a portfolio review and one thing the person mentioned was that there are not a lot of screens in your work. And I'm like, that is my work. Like I don't actually come up with a lot of screens. Most of the times it would be scenarios, like how would things work. Can it be done by doing this, by doing that? So there are a lot of different things we have to think about.
Can you give us an example of?
Yeah, so basically, so I'll give you an example of Apple. So like Apple introduced UWB chipsets, which are ultra wideband chipsets, in their phone on the launch of like iPhone 11, and they were used to detect your lost earbuds and even the tags which came later. Now we also have similar things in our phones, but we have NFC as well. Now NFC also acts as a way to communicate between devices, right? So recently what we were working on is that even though if we don't have, for example, the UWB chip inside our watch, can we use NFC to communicate between the watches? And that was one thing which led to a lot of ideations. So these things keep on happening. So you have to find alternatives of what you already have, and can it communicate the same thing which a superior technology might have to provide. So you have to always find alternatives. You have to know what the prime technology, or like for example UWB over here, can do. And then you have to think about same things. Can it be done using what we already have? If not, where can we cut corners? And but we have to keep the similar experience very similar.
Very streamlined.
Yeah, very streamlined.
Okay. And Abhi, you mentioned about Apple. We also had a discussion on how Apple sort of, determines a few things that are happening in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, many of technologies which are getting built get visibility because they market it in such a way, because no one actually thinks about many of the things which Apple uses, right? Like you have LiDAR sensors in their phones. We don't know why they use it. I know because that's my job, but people don't know like what is a specific use.
Hmm.
Unless you are very much interested in the tech, you don't know what is the particular use case. A normal user won't be using a LiDAR sensor that much, right? Like inside their phones. What it is used for, it is used for scanning 3D objects and things, but
But
from a
then
phone.
why have they introduced it?
So if you see, we earlier we thought it's a very short term plan, right? Like it is just to use the LiDAR scanner to help you, be good at photography, like depth sensing and all these things. But later in the long term, right now when you see at the launch of Vision Pro, you find out that these LiDAR sensors can actually be used to create 3D memories.
Hmm.
And once when you think about like how can this technology be made much more humane, you start thinking about what can be done, and then Apple suddenly thinks about we can use it to create memories. We can create maybe houses. You can customize your houses on a digital device and then see how it looks in real life.
Hmm.
So yeah, there are many such things which you might have never thought can be used for a personal purpose, but they end up becoming so human that it just naturally fits into your life.
Hmm.
Yeah, and similarly in Samsung as well, like we earlier UWB chips were used to detect people who are in basically in military devices, right? So like in military UWB chipsets or these communication waves are used to detect people hiding behind a wall and things like that, because they have good presence detection and as well as they use very less power. So using less power, they were able to put it inside a phone. Take that example. And now you can't use it to detect people inside through a phone, but for example, they used it to detect friends. They used that kind of an analogy. Like for example, when you're trying to find someone in a busy market, ठीक है, busy market में अभी दोस्त को ढूंढना है, अभी उसका लोकेशन तो तुम ऐसे ढूंढते बैठोगे तो you will reach a certain radius की where they are standing, but you won't
But
be
you
able to
can't find them.
pinpoint them. And that's where they had a use case where you can exactly get the location, like how you find your AirPods. You can get a precise location of where they're exactly standing. So these many use cases which make technology, these very wide technologies human, is possibly the kind of domain that I work with.
Yeah. So all these use cases that you just told me, for example, a person, an engineer, came up with the whole technicality between Find My Phone. But how that Find My Phone strategy would work, how would it actually be implemented is something that you decide, and how the user's stories and scenarios can work around it. That's something that you and your team brainstorm on.
It's mostly about, so we obviously don't go to people and make them experiment with things. Most of the time it is just thinking about scenarios, like what if I was in that position, because research is kind of expensive, especially for this tech, and being in a very rudimentary stage, right? Like it's not completely built. So like the products which we get from the engineers are sometimes so basic that you're like, ये phone में कैसे जाने वाला है, और ये watch में कैसे fit होने वाला है, like this is too basic right now. But when you start building use cases, the engineers also try to optimize that particular product at the same time, and suddenly it starts working. And I think that's really surprising for every one of us, because my project, so like yesterday, a project which I worked 2 years back finally got launched. I still have to wait for the reviews, but still there were a lot of tech challenges which were coming in the very early stages, but somehow we have to find things to work out, and the engineers do their stuff pretty well.
So since it's launched, can you talk about that particular?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can show it.
Oh, you can show it. Wow.
Like it's not working on an iPhone because I work for Samsung, so it's very much dedicated to Samsung. But basically, I can share the image with you later, but basically these are cards which pop up when you are near your devices, like be it a TV or anything.
Okay.
So we are reducing the dependency on applications.
Okay. So you can sort of control everything from
one place instead of going into applications, because that was our concept. Now the interesting part was that we started this ideation focusing on an Indian consumer,
Hmm.
but it ended up becoming global. Like the fun thing about Indian consumers is that we have very less number of devices to work with. Like when you consider smart homes, no one has a lot of smart devices at their
Correct.
places, right?
Yes.
ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा घर पे smart TV होता है. That's what you call a smart device, and we consider it as like the most sold device as well in the country as well as globally. So you have only 2 to 3 devices to work with. Like it would be a smart AC, it would be a smart fan ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा, और TV तो सबके घर पे होता है. And when you think globally, the average goes to around 20 devices per home. Like when we get data about like what kind of devices are American households using, we start seeing that there are a lot of devices. But the fun thing working with Indian consumers is that you go into such a small niche कि यार टीवी को कैसे अच्छा कर सकते हैं. एंड सो इंटरेस्टिंग टेक अवे व्हाट वी फाउंड वाज दैट कि यार लोगों को ऐप में जाना अच्छा नहीं लगता है.
किसमें अच्छा?
ऐप में जाना, लाइक तुम्हें टीवी यूज़ करना है, तुम ऐप में जाओगे, वो टीवी को ऑन करोगे, फिर उसका रिमोट आएगा. लॉट ऑफ स्टेप्स, राइट? इंस्टेड यू कैन जस्ट find your normal remote and switch on the TV. But this was the insight we actually worked on, ki people are not liking going inside an app and using their devices. They want something which is upfront and goes with their traditional mental model ki yaar I picked up a device, I switched on the stuff, that's it. Itna hi hona chahiye. And that's where this idea started coming in, that we need a place outside the app, something which is much more contextual. Like when you go next to your TV, things should come to you rather than you doing it.
You setting it up and going to multiple apps and everything.
And so the thing was, this problem was definitely not native at all. Like it was a global issue. Like many people didn't end up using the smartphones as their way of controlling these smart devices. And that's supposed to be the USP of smart devices, right? Like you can control them on your phones. बट ऐसा नहीं हो रहा था. एंड देन दिस स्मॉल प्रॉब्लम विच वी फाउंड थ्रू इंडियन यूजर्स कि यार उन्हें ऐप नहीं खोलना है. वी ट्राई टू मेक सोल्यूशंस जहाँ पे कोई भी डिवाइस अगर पहले से ही ऑन रहेगा तो उसके कंट्रोल्स मुझे पहले ही दिखा दो. सो दैट हैपेंड एन इंडियन सोल्यूशन फॉर अस, बट लेटर इट वॉज टेकन ग्लोबली बिकॉज इट हैड दैट नीड कि किसी को भी ऐप के अंदर नहीं जाना है. एवरीवन वांट्स कंट्रोल्स आउटसाइड. So that's how this solution got pitched in and it's launched yesterday. So I'm waiting for what kind of reviews I get.
Very happy for you.
I guess.
But right now you said about different audience from different regions. So you said na Indian audience ka thinking is very different from the thinking of the audience outside of India. How do you sort of manage that? Because your product is not just streamlined to India. It's everywhere. So how do you manage your research with that tangent?
So we definitely depend highly on the PM team for all of this, because
PM team?
Like product management team. Because generally we can't go to so many places, and most of our consumers, like heavily the ones who use these devices, are located in US, and Samsung being a Korean company, there is a huge base in Korea as well. These two countries remain like the top 2 priorities every time. And we get insights through the product management team. We get insights from the headquarters as well, that certain things are not working right, because we sitting over here can't imagine what is happening out there. We can only work on what is up with Indian consumers, with the kind of reach we can go with. Like I can definitely talk to someone staying in Delhi or somewhere in down south, but I can't properly reach and understand what the person in West is feeling about our products. So for that, definitely someone like the headquarters team, design team would reach out to us saying that we have found that people are not liking such and such things, and this is a very common issue. Then we start thinking about it.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely it's a very I think we are in a very ecosystem kind of a working system where everyone is pretty much dependent on each other in a way. That's I think for all companies. But yeah, it's different when you get insights from global perspectives, and then somehow when you try to get similarities कि हाँ यार इधर भी यही हो रहा है, then it becomes much more easier for us कि we can pitch it there as well.
Correct.
तो वो होता है रहता है.
And Abhi, you mentioned about a more immersive way of, experiencing things, right? You sort of told about, you mentioned a little about Apple, you mentioned a little about, how if there are certain sensors which tell you, okay, this person is near me right now, this person is not.
Yeah.
We also have this very huge thing that just got launched by Apple. That was the Vision Pro.
Yeah.
How is that? What's your thought on that? Is that a game changer in the industry? What are your thoughts on the AR VR perspective of it?
So again, definitely, as I told you, right, like these specific companies have a lot of cultural influence. So before Apple launched Vision Pro, I like the main use case of a VR AR device was typically targeted for gamers, or someone who would want to enter these virtual worlds and actually normally play games. Like that was the main use case. अगर तुम कोई प्ले जोन में भी जाते, they had like virtual device headset और तुम वहाँ पे एक shooting game खेल सकते हो ना. So that was like the main use case, and no one thought कि productivity and all these things can be brought in VR. But that's where Apple make use of their ecosystem, right? Like they have laptops, they have phones. So how these devices talk to each other, and then they show a use case over there कि तुम Mac के सामने काम कर रहे हो और Mac का screen बड़ा हो गया, and then you start thinking कि यार ये पहले क्यों नहीं सोचा किसी ने ऐसा सब कुछ. But that's the thing कि when you have tons of devices talking to each other, you can come up with such use cases. I don't know, मतलब see, I know the meaning of the word pod. So when they were making the first iMac, you remember the colorful iMac? I don't know if you were you born back then?
अरे ऐसा नहीं है, but colorful iMacs.
हाँ, तो जो colorful iMacs थे उनमें they were the first to put a fire drive.
Okay.
ठीक है, फायर ड्राइव जैसी USB ड्राइव कि डेटा ट्रांसफ़र कर सकते हो तुम टू अदर डिवाइस. अभी हमारे लिए काफ़ी नॉर्मल है ना कि USB प्लग इन करो, तुम फ़ोन प्लग इन कर दो, फ़ोन की चीज़ें लैपटॉप पर डाल सकते हो और ये सब कुछ. बट दैट टाइम इट वॉज अ बिग नॉवेल्टी. लाइक यू कुड कनेक्ट योर कैमरा टू योर PC and you can transfer data between them. And so basically iMac was the first to have a fire port, and they later thought कि अगर हमारे पास ये पोर्ट है we can use it. and तभी MP3 काफ़ी फेमस हो रहा था. like music was getting on internet and they were thinking कि पायरेसी का बहुत इशू हो रहा है. पहले लोग कैसे MP3 में डाल रहे थे कि CD ले रहे थे, कंप्यूटर में बर्न कर रहे थे वो CD and then transferring it to their MP3 devices. But Apple was like, we have a Bolt, let's do one thing, we download the music on the PC with iTunes and then we transfer it to the pod, and anything which gets connected to the main device is called a pod. So like a phone is also a pod for the Mac. So pods are basically peripheral devices, like outside devices which get connected to your computer. That's why iPod, the word came in. And then I think वहाँ से ही
the podcasting
कि people using iPods for broadcasting. So that's why it became podcast.
हाँ, Apple तो हर ही जगह मुझे लग रहा है.
हाँ, they have been a very big cultural influence for sure. Like I don't remember any other instance कि जहाँ पे they have not been there. Like every technological moment they have. So they might not be the first one to ever do it, but when they do it, I can't say about current times. Currently, I think they are slacking, but at least till the Steve Jobs times, when they did things, they were very different in how others would do it. Like touchscreen earlier, touchscreen was existing since 1990s. But when they brought it into phones, they made sure कि it can be something new to use. Like ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि सिर्फ choose कर रहे हो. Like they were the first to bring ये interaction. तुम photos को zoom करते हो. ये अभी काफ़ी common चीज़ है. But तभी
that you zoom and
when you first go and see the launch of 2007, you will see that the live audience is going crazy. Like कि ये क्या है, मतलब ये कौन सा इंटरेक्शन होता है. तो काफ़ी सारी छोटी छोटी चीज़ें विच आर लाइक कि दे ड्रॉ इंस्पिरेशन फ्रॉम द रियल लाइफ एंड देन दे पुट इट इन टू डिजिटल एंड देन सडनली पीपल आर लाइक हाँ यार ऐसे ही तो होना
ऐसे
चाहिए.
भी कर सकते हैं.
वही.
पर उसके पीछे बहुत सारे टेक्निकल चीज़ें भी तो होती होंगी. हाउ डू सो डू यू थिंक दे फर्स्ट लाइक राइट नाउ यू सेड दैट टेक्निकल थिंग्स आर मेड फर्स्ट एंड देन यू सॉर्ट ऑफ डिज़ाइन हाउ द एक्सपीरियंस ऑफ इट इज़ गोना बी लाइक. डू दे थिंक कि ओ हम ऐसा लाइक इज़ इट लाइक कि दे नो कि ऐसा कुछ हम कर सकते हैं कि जूम पिंच करके जूम इन हो सकता है, या फिर वो ये पहले सोचते हैं कि पिंच करके क्यों नहीं जूम इन हो सकता है एंड देन दे थिंक अबाउट द टेक्नोलॉजी.
I think it's a circular process. I don't think कि ऐसा होता होगा कि some engineer would tell them and say कि multi touch है तो हम ये interaction कर सकते हैं. Generally it would also be the need from the designers end when they were thinking कि यार इतना फ़ोन है मेरे पास, अभी लोग जूम करने के लिए प्लस बटन को टैप 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 करते बैठ रहे हैं. How do I zoom a photo? Because people zoomed photos before as well. Like on your previous Nokia QWERTY phones and everything, if you want to zoom in a photo, you had to press the arrow button, like the up arrow, and then the photo would start zooming. Now, when you don't have any buttons at all on your phone, someone might have thought कि you know we need certain interaction which doesn't feel very different, कि कुछ नया सीखने मिल रहा है. बट ऐसा लगना चाहिए कि हाँ ये नेचुरली है, मतलब मुझे अगर चीज़ें बड़ी करनी है तो मैं उन्हें खींचता हूँ ना. तो सिमिलरली सम कॉन्सेप्ट ब्रिंग इट इनटू डिजिटल. मुझे तो आई डोंट थिंक कि सम इंजीनियर वाज लाइक कि ये करते हैं, कोई और भी हो सकता था.
बट ऑल्सो जैसे अभी फर्स्ट टाइम दे केम अप विद द जूम इन वाला थिंग,
Yeah.
हाउ डू यू गाइज ऑल्सो डिसाइड ऑन द लर्निंग कर्व ऑफ योर feature or function that you come up with, because obviously you're coming up with extremely new features or something जो अभी तक नहीं है in the industry. तो how do you decide कि oh this will take up a lot of the users energy, cognitive load ज़्यादा हो जाएगा, वो नहीं कर पाएंगे, या
See, we try to stick to the design system which is already stable and already laid. So, especially for us, because we have, being an R&D department, we don't get much freedom on making something very completely new. Like ऐसे नहीं हो सकता है कि हम सैमसंग के फ़ोन्स का इंटरफेस जैसे दिख रहा है कल ऐसे दिखना शुरू हो जाएगा. दैट्स नॉट मच वी कैन डू ओवर देयर. बट वॉट वी डू इज़ कि जो पहले से फाउंडेशंस विच आर ऑलरेडी डेड, we make use of those components and try to be flexible with those. It becomes difficult at certain times because you would want the experience to be so and so, but you don't have that freedom to make it. So then you have to somehow stick to basics only.
And right now when you said कि Apple, I don't know if you just said it as, but it's lacking a little bit in terms of what they used to do पहले.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a reason behind it? ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है? Because अभी जैसे अब जितने भी आईफोन मॉडल्स हैं सब सेम डिज़ाइन के आ रहे हैं. पहले दे यूज टू एक्सपेरिमेंट सो मच विद इट, बट नाउ इट्स लिटरली
See, like I consider it like at the start of a company, you need people who are very product driven. Like they want to make sure कि people get the product right, and then when the company has reached a point where the product lineup is set, people are using it, then you want to generate profits on that. So that's why when you see during the Steve Jobs era, there would be a lot of last moment changes as well. Like कि महंगे से महंगा prototype, whenever there would be any conferences and conferences नहीं, I would say meetings जब भी होते थे internal meetings, तभी whenever people showed their demos to Steve Jobs, I've thought about this, तो he would make them do last moment changes as well. Like there are two very famous instances. तो जब first Mac, the cream colored Mac, when it was launched, he wanted कि जब भी वो on हो, the PC should say hello, like hello का text आना चाहिए. And this was not decided till the time the product was getting developed. ठीक है, ये लास्ट मोमेंट पे था, इट क्लिक्ड कि हेलो आना चाहिए. एंड प्रेजेंटेशन को कुछ तो 3-4 घंटे ही बचे for the launch. Everyone is at the auditorium में थे सब, everyone was at an auditorium, and last moment पे the engineer is coding behind the, he's coding at the backstage and basically making sure कि भाई जब भी PC on हो hello word आना चाहिए. And another one was कि जब पहला iPod का प्रोटोटाइप बन रहा था, they were trying to make it as small as possible because the existing MP3s were like a big chunk. ठीक है, बहुत मोटे होते थे. And their concept was कि it should be as small as a cigarette box. कि छोटा रहना चाहिए, किसी को भी पॉकेट में डाल दो, किधर भी लेके जाओ. So जब फर्स्ट प्रोटोटाइप बना, मेकिंग हार्डवेयर प्रोटोटाइप्स इज रियली एक्सपेंसिव. बैक देन तो इट वॉज वेरी एक्सपेंसिव. 3D प्रिंटिंग भी नहीं था तभी इतना पॉपुलराइज. तो when the first prototype is shown to Steve, he sees that this is too bulky, and then the head engineer is like कि this is the smallest we can do, like the components are already packed too close to each other. Now Steve के ऑफिस में पीछे एक एक्वेरियम है, ठीक है. He just throws the prototype inside the aquarium and then bubbles forward from the device. He like device के अंदर हवा जा रही है, मतलब अभी भी जगह है, तो उसे और छोटा कर देना. So these are very last moment changes.
That is so cool.
So basically in the start of a company you need people who make sure कि product set होना चाहिए, and then later now when you see Timco, more sales oriented, the stock price has never been higher before, and he's running the company now. So this transition usually happens. It depends, like if a company still wants to push so much, at the end of the day it's a company, it wants to make profit, so ideologies change.
Cool. Now coming back to the topic that we were talking about, the I'm saying the AR VR, and since we are in the niche of talking about Apple, now since Apple sort of launched the Vision Pro, now we all know that AR was there, it was still very much there and people knew about it, but Apple sort of just like made it like a thing now ki okay, Vision Pro aa gaya, you can use it like this. And in our like I don't mind saying it, in our colleges also we are like they tell us not to work more in the AR area, just focus on the just try to understand the user first, then go in the technicalities of it. So what's your say on AR VR in general, and how is the industry or the people, the audience, sort of engaging with AR VR more? Are they welcoming it into their own system?
I wouldn't say it's very welcoming at this point. It is still at a stage जहाँ पे चीज़ें बन रही है. It is similarly जब the first smartphone came in and then there was nothing to do. Like you could just call, you could just see photos. There weren't any apps and people just used it for normal calling purposes. They didn't know about how can it be utilized further. So I think it is at the same stage right now. Hardware बन चुका है and there are certain things which you can do, but that's it. Can there be things which can be much more better to do on AR instead of a computer? Those things are still a debate. So it's at a very nascent stage right now, but I would say it is like the golden time. Like I don't think like phones will get obsolete at any coming period. They will have to stay relevant because this is something which has got stuck in our head, right? कि pocket से निकालो, phone तो होना ही चाहिए. Now the thing is, Apple is slowly trying to push that thing कि अभी तक तो the Vision Pro is a home device only, कि अभी घर पे काम कर सकते हो. So basically it can replace your Mac in certain ways, but obviously the future roadmaps would be to take that device outside and slowly replace it with your phone. So it will take time, but I definitely see a future where, and I think people should consider AR VR experiences as a medium and not just stick to your 2D screens. There can be things which can be much more better done in AR and VR space. So definitely take advantage of that.
Okay. Now, when we are talking about AR and VR, I also know that you closely work with machine learning, you closely work with AI. How is that impacting the industry? Because now we have different types of AI. Generative AI is coming in, there is predictive AI. How all of that is used at Samsung, if you want to say, or how do you incorporate that in your designs?
Yeah, so my domain is typically much more rigid. It's mostly smart homes, right? So there's not a lot of exploration towards productivity or these kind of things, which requires different kind of mediums. So, but I do also work with a bit of the Galaxy AI team, and one thing which is like a big buzzword for this year at least, it's personalization. Personalization is very huge because AI is making it possible now. So the current theme for any tech company right now is to provide experiences which are catered to uh, only to that particular user. For example, I'm different than what you are. Like, you use your phone differently than I do, so you definitely want something catered to you. ऐसे नहीं होना चाहिए यार मुझे भी यही बटन दिख रहा है तो तुम्हें भी वही बटन दिखना चाहिए. And that's a very big deal currently in the industry. Like, uh, these companies want to take the advantage of the fact that you can use the data which you obviously allow your phones to track, right? Like your fitness data or your location, and then how it can provide you the most relevant thing right there, which is very personalized to what you generally do. Like, for example, if I somehow pass through my gym and I get a card like, are you willing to start a workout or something like that, which is very unique to me. So these kind of things are a big buzz currently, and most of our efforts are basically working on things to make them very custom for very different kind of users. So, and generative AI and machine learning is basically making that possible, because एक तो कि जनरेटिव एआई का आउटपुट इज़ ऑलवेज डिफरेंट. सो ऐसा तो नहीं रहेगा कि तुम सेम टेम्पलेट दोगे और वो सेम आंसर्स देते बैठेगा. एंड द बेस्ट थिंग अबाउट दिस इज़ दैट basically now user interface won't be very simple, I would say. Like, अभी एक structure है, there is a certain structure to how things work. It might be dynamic. Like, in the future, everyone's preferences are so different that the UI will change accordingly. So
Okay.
that is definitely a trend. कि things won't be very simple or structured. They will change according to how people use the particular app.
But won't it get confusing?
So it will work on the mental model of that phone user only, right? Like, if I give my phone to someone else, they might think कि इतना अलग क्यों है, but it is not catered for them. It is catered for the person who is using that phone only. So I definitely think कि it's a new paradigm for sure. कि मतलब अभी तक पता नहीं how will people react to it, but that is the trend. I can't say anything else because
Makes sense.
but it's a trend. Like, you
Okay.
will not see everyone using the same interface. Everyone will have their own interfaces.
But then why is Apple working so much? Like the Apple phones, they have, like, their interface is just the same for everyone. That's what most of the Android users, the main thing that the Android users say कि इतना customize कर सकते हैं Android पे. You can customize your screen, you can come up with different themes, different, the places of putting your icons and whatever. But Apple, it follows a certain, like, there are certain guidelines that you can't
Which
just,
they have broken now.
they have.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, in the
In
latest
their,
event, they did allow, they allow users to change the positions of the application however they want. It's not rigid now. It, as I said, like, personalization is becoming a big thing. It's a very
But my question was morely कि the themes, for example, if we take the theme of a phone, abhi in some Android like users, they put like a very pink sort of a theme, if
And
you
के
say.
icons भी pink हो जाते हैं.
हाँ, but then what happens is that there is no like brand का कुछ reflection नहीं आता. Like for example, if I see iPhone का UI, I know this is iPhone's UI. I
But
know
that's
it.
what they've changed now.
So, okay, so that's better to sort of come up with a.
I won't comment on what's better because I haven't used it yet, but that's what people are preferring. Like at least our generation, that they want to personalize their things according to their needs. Like अभी तुम जब घर बनाते हो, you would want a certain chair, you would want a certain kind of lighting, because you wanted to make it custom to your needs. So similarly, people want to put their own style on their phones as well. And iPhones or like Apple in general has been very rigid in the earlier stages where like कि इतना क्यों देना है, मतलब जो पहले से चल रहा है उसे ही देने दो. People have becoming accustomed to our previous interfaces, तो अभी क्यों change करना चाहिए? But that's changing because people want something of their own to be shown on the phone. Like personality दिखनी चाहिए.
Correct. Got it. Now we have talked so much about the technical aspects of it. Do you have any insights on how the financial aspects of that technical thing works? Like if you come up with a total, like for example, you just said that your whole design that you thought of just launched. How much? First of all, how long did it took? I think you just said 2 years. And apart from that, there must be a lot of financial constraints that the company has to go through, right, in coming up with a completely new idea and launching it.
So I can't comment on the hardware side. That's for industrial designers. But for UX at least, when it comes to designing very newer experiences, considering smart homes in general, so when you talk about smart homes, these devices are not connected via wires, right? Like they are talking via internet, and when you talk via internet, you need a computer which is either in your home or somewhere there and somewhere outside, and this outside computer is a cloud basically. And the thing is, talking to cloud becomes a very expensive transaction. Like for example, when you turn on a light from your phone, that command is going to a cloud and then it is coming to the light. And this transaction is definitely the company is bearing, because they know कि light तो सब शुरू बंद करेगी. But now when you come up with something very new, and there are chances कि यार इससे यूज़र बहुत बार खेल सकता है और अभी इससे ट्रांजैक्शन बढ़ते जाएगा, बिकॉज एवरी टाइम दे आर प्रेसिंग सम बटन, क्लाउड पे जाता है और फिर क्लाउड हैज़ टू एक्ट. एंड इससे कैसे होता है, क्लाउड हैज़ अ सर्टेन लिमिट. इफ़ यू स्टार्ट यूजिंग इट अ लॉट, वो बहुत एक्सपेंसिव होते जाता है इन दी एंड. एंड दैट्स वाई वी हैव लाइक क्लाउड कॉस्ट, विच इज़ अ वेरी बिग टर्म, and you have to make sure that you don't make certain things which would make an engineer's life a hell, because they'll have to optimize your product at such a level ki the cloud cost remains very low, or that becomes a huge challenge for us. That we have to stick with these constraints, jahan pe whenever we make a solution ki it shouldn't interfere much with the cloud infrastructure. Like it should be very simple. So that becomes like a huge financial constraint, I would say.
And you also said that not going into the industrial side of it, like you can generally, because there are a lot of industrial people also listening to it. How does the industrial bit, if you know anything about it, industrial costing goes around a new launch?
Like I haven't practiced much industrial, even though I'm an industrial designer. But I would say, like, obviously making a mold or coming up with something very new adds to the cost. Like if you have an existing template, it becomes easier to build on that. But when you're making something completely new, like पूरा नया ही फॉर्म बना दिया है, then you have to build from scratch, and that becomes expensive, and you can't explore a lot of options because it becomes very expensive in the end. So similarly, when it comes to like digital products which are heavily dependent on cloud, you have to keep the cost in mind, and that becomes a hurdle as well. Like as a designer, when you start thinking, you think of many possibilities, right? Like ये हो सकता है, वो हो सकता है. बट फिर जब कॉस्टिंग आता है देन यू हैव टू टेक अ स्टेप बैक एंड थिंक यार ये तो कर ही नहीं सकते अभी, तो क्या करें अभी. Then the engineer will tell you that ये हटा दो वो हटा दो, but then you have poured so
The
much.
whole essence of
हाँ, you
the.
have poured so much heart in making that one particular feature,
Hmm.
and in the end then engineer is like यार नहीं ये बहुत महंगा है ये करना. And on the other hand you are just thinking कि यार बटन ही तो दबाना है, like but वो बटन दबाने से जितना क्लाउड पे लोड बढ़ रहा है,
That is.
that is the issue.
Now, since we are going a little towards the end of the podcast, I we talked a lot about what you work, how you work right now, and what all things encompasses in your day-to-day life. But there are also a few internships that you talked about. That's Havels and Bosch and all these things. Can you tell a little bit about those internships and what were your experience there, and how did you crack them? Because right now, people who would be watching this are in the phase of getting into the industry, getting internships. Like, what was your experience?
Hmm. So Havels one definitely was not via networking. They had come to the college and they were asking for 3 students who could help them in making IoT products, like smart products. And luckily my portfolio was ready by that time and I got the internship. But when it came for my industry experience internship, which was during my 4th years, it was becoming kind of a challenge because obviously in a batch of 60 you need to find a place as soon as possible, and like I had to find a company which would basically align with my needs, because till that time I was not purely a digital designer. I was still an industrial designer. Sounds very wrong for a podcast because it would really gaslight a lot of people. But yeah, like I think LinkedIn is always the best platform to reach out to anyone. And one thing is, I don't know if it's a very correct way of saying, but whenever I reach out to people, I don't reach out to them with a formal tone, because I consider that they are designers as well. And
You just
when
go like, yo, bro.
not yo bro, but you can ask them for directly for their number and like, do you want to keep talking on LinkedIn, can we directly get on a call? So yeah, so like when we were finding our internships for our 4th year, and there were very few companies which were actually catering to my interest, and one of them was Bosch, because previously our seniors who were part of Bosch did give some good reviews. They said you get to explore a lot on home appliances, and home appliances have already been and are still are like I'm still working with home appliances.
Sorry to cut you off, but as an industrial designer, Bosch was a good niche, or as a UX designer?
So definitely that time I was finding internships as an industrial designer, and uh, at that time when Bosch came to our for the campus internship placements, I already had some previous reviews from our seniors, and I wanted to get in for sure. But I think they had a certain constraint of taking 2 designers from the entire batch, and that kind of became very difficult for me as well, because now there are so many people applying for this particular role. So I tried reaching out to the person in charge, like the hiring manager, via LinkedIn, and that definitely helped, because I wouldn't have got this flexibility by reaching out to someone from a placement department. Like, I don't know if they would have ever helped me in getting in touch with Bosch, saying that he really wants to work with you, but I got in touch with the hiring manager via LinkedIn, and then we did get on a call on the very same day, and then where I was able to share my interest about home appliances, and that I don't know, that worked really well for me, because they made a place for a third designer, and yeah, I got into Bosch. So definitely just directly reach to the person and don't hesitate at all. Like, just talk to them. Even in the start, if they don't reply to you, keep on texting.
Hmm.
Uh, Weekly basis, don't spam them. Like I have
Tuck, tuck,
learned,
tuck, tuck, tuck,
yeah,
tuck,
I
tuck,
have
tuck.
learned this a lot. Like in my early times, still early times, but
Huh.
I generally spammed a lot, like every single day. What's the update? What's the update?
Yeah.
And then people would end up blocking you.
You got blocked?
हाँ मतलब होता है मतलब they were not
I
Indian.
just love how you just try to be chill about it. हाँ
हाँ,
ठीक है whatever.
होता है but then you have to find a certain pattern, right? कि
Hmm.
मतलब कब बात कर सकते हैं.
Yeah.
So yeah, just give them a nudge every week.
Hi bro, what's up?
Someday it might work. You have to be
Yeah.
persistent. Like
Keep knocking. Someday
yeah,
it might
कुछ
open.
तो हो ही जाएगा.
Now, another question I have in mind is, since we talked about your work at Samsung, can you list down at least 3 experiences, lessons, or just, designs or something that you did at Samsung which you still remember very much?
Well, it's just been 2 years, so I do remember everything. So, one is definitely patience because considering that I'm working with the research and development department, uh, not all your ideas will go in the very first fly.
Hmm.
And my manager has helped me a lot in this particular side. I still don't know how he is so chill regarding that. When an idea is so good and you want it to get implemented as soon as possible, but the company is a step back. It's like कि थोड़ा time लगेगा. And as a designer at an early stage, you want your ideas to go out, right? Like you want quick validation, you want to see how people react, but that was not the case for me because, as I told you, right, it took 2 years for my project which I did in start of my Samsung career, in August, in September. Like in September when I came up with these proposals, it took 1 year to convince that why we need these solutions, and then later after so much hassle it finally worked out. So definitely you should believe in your product. That's one thing. If you really think that हाँ ये actually चाहिए ही चाहिए, then definitely stick behind it. You will always have teammates to fight with you for that product, and always have an healthy debate. Like question your product managers, question your developers कि why क्यों नहीं हो सकता, and yeah, just collaboration is very important because I don't think I will be ever be able to come up with so many things if I don't know how the tech works. And I know how the tech works because there is someone to explain me. If I
Correct.
sit with them and make them part of my ideations, then I'm much more aligned with what can be done. For example, जब भी कोई ideation होता है for a newer proposal, there would be developers and product managers sitting with us and making sure that whatever we think of, and especially the things which can't be done, are jotted down there itself कि ये नहीं हो सकता, so let's not take a lot of efforts on building those. And then what we get in the remaining bits is actually quite useful. Like we can actually build on these things. This is possible. So when we end up with like 4 to 5 sticky notes by eliminating 50, that 4 to 5 sticky notes then give you a certain confidence कि हाँ इस पे तो अभी काम हो ही सकता है. Like it's not that I have to again start thinking कि ये हो पाएगा नहीं हो पाएगा.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Really.
So yeah, I guess collaboration, patience, and healthy debates.
Healthy debates.
Yeah, definitely don't always say yes in the very first go.
Yeah.
Reflect. Like I think I do tend to debate a lot with my engineers when they come up to me and say कि ये नहीं हो पाएगा, and then सीधे मत बोल दो उन्हें. You have to reflect on why they are saying this, and then definitely there could be a healthy debate, and then you could reach a common ground.
And in that process you learn a lot as well, no?
Yeah,
Ki what is their mindset, why are they saying it,
Yeah,
and plus you get a different perspective altogether once you sit and listen to what are they trying to say.
definitely.
Now since we are heading towards the end of the podcast. I have this one season question that I ask everyone, and that's basically, what do you think is the yellow in you, or what do you think is something that makes you different? You can think about it.
Give me a minute now.
2 minutes.
I don't know, like I'm optimistic. I'm always optimistic now, considering what my experience has taught me in these last 2 years, that एक झटके में नहीं हुआ तो भी ठीक है, कभी ना कभी पहुंच जाएगा, and when it reaches it is at a very good stage.
Correct.
So optimism के बारे में ही बोल सकता हूँ मैं.
But it's a valid yellow. Not everyone is. I am the not at all.
And
optimist.
definitely, this might sound wrong, but
It's
take people along with you.
Huh?
Take people along with you.
Take people along with you.
Don't
okay?
die alone. Take someone with you.
Okay, just risk factor थोड़ा कम हो जाता है.
हाँ, मतलब definitely अगर तुम कोई मीटिंग पर अकेले जाने से अच्छा, if there's someone who has been working with you and can definitely help you in making your case stronger, take them with you.
Amazing. Yeah, it's actually a smart play also. Why do you want to take all the heat for yourself?
No,
थोड़ा
that
और-
sounds very wrong as well. Like,
No,
why can't you
like-
take all the heat?
For example, if it's a idea that both of you sort of agree with,
Yeah.
then you will have like more force ना from your side. अभी मेरे सामने 3 लोग आके सेम चीज़ बोलेंगे, obviously gravity उसका ज़्यादा
Because
होगा
मेरा
than
ऐसा
just one
काफ़ी होता
person.
है कि whenever I am pitching a certain idea and I have someone who was part of that ideation, though not a main stakeholder of that project, but they have been a part of that ideation and they sit with me for the meetings. I wouldn't be able to defend them as good as they do. Sometimes they bring a very different lens and try to defend the idea in a way where like, oh, ऐसे भी तो हो सकता था, and then you just sit quiet and let that
Let
person
them-
take the stage, and that's completely fine, because
Yeah.
in overall it's a win for you as well, because your concepts are getting ahead, but you are getting help from someone, and as long as your designs
It's okay if someone else can explain your stuff in a different manner than what you thought.
Yeah,
it to be.
definitely. Like, because sometimes what happens is, like, the PM will come up with things like and put you in a position where you have to start thinking, "Abhi jaldi se kya answer do?" Like, you want to defend your product, but you also want to reflect, are they saying something wrong? Am I wrong? And then suddenly there is hope, because someone next to you is like कि
नहीं गलत
ये
है।
तुम्हें फंसा रहे हैं, तो and then they'll say something, and then Uno reverse the question to the PM team.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so definitely I think the yellow would be optimism and tag teams.
Tag teams.
Yes.
Because I had a similar experience right now only. Once you said this, a week before only, I was just showing my designs to the team, and I wasn't able to draft a proper brief about my design. Like, I was
like-
trying, but
वो प्रॉपर कम्युनिकेशन नहीं हो
हो
रहा था.
नहीं रहा था, मैं मेरा पॉइंट नहीं जा रहा था. एंड माई CEO, he sort of got it. He got it, and then on my behalf he was sort of debating with the whole team कि ऐसा 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 है, and I was feeling like okay, I should be the one doing it, but like मेरे
but
को
like
नहीं आ रहा है
next
करना.
time you can definitely
But then-
use that.
Correct. I learned so much from that debate, because I was like, this person, by just understanding my design in one go, could tell it to articulate it
much better,
than
yeah.
me. So yeah, that was a big whoa,
Yeah, definitely, because
brainstorm moment.
like in my office I might look like I generally work alone, but there is definitely a lot of people behind that work who are always giving me certain ideas at the fly. Like, मैं काम करता रहूँगा स्क्रीन पे, एंड सडनली सामने से ये ऐसा क्यों किया है, इरिटेट भी होता होगा बीच बीच में, बट suddenly that idea might be really helpful for you, and as they know कि you have been working on this, they can defend it for you as well.
Yeah, correct.
So that definitely works.
Also, one more question I forgot to ask, that is, what type of people do you think would be a good fit in something that you are doing? Because it's not a
Screen
mainstream
based,
thing.
totally screen running UX.
Sorry?
It's not completely screen
Yeah,
based.
it's not screen based. It's not very mainstream sort of a thing that everyone can end up doing. So
Mm, I wouldn't say it's not mainstream. Like obviously your end products some way do end up on screens. But thinking about use cases, that time the product is not in your head. Like you don't know कि ये use case कौन से device पे ज़्यादा better होगा, कि tablet पे ज़्यादा अच्छा रहेगा, phone पे ज़्यादा अच्छा रहेगा, watch पे ज़्यादा अच्छा रहेगा. But definitely people who are tech geeks for sure, कि मतलब you have been following MKBHD from very early days. You have been listening to him saying about how this camera works, how these things work, or anyone in general who, when some product gets launched and they talk about certain things like इससे photography better हो जाएगा, and what are they using, and just getting to know like how things are being made. But generally, yeah, tech geeks for sure, and people who are interested, they should be interested, the ones who are interested in knowing how things work, especially in the hardware side.
yeah,
Because once you know that these particular hardwares make such things possible, then you can think of endless scenarios.
correct.
So definitely, yeah. If you
Okay.
follow MKBHD from a very long time, many people might already be towards this field. They will be inclined if they like tech.
Got it. Okay, so I think so. It's a wrap. Yeah, it's a wrap, and we've come to the end of the podcast. I hope you had a great time, Atharva.
Yes.